everybody, and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. And I have a special one breaking down the entire PulseChain ecosystem because this entire market looks like it's ready to reverse, and I do see a lot of upside potential inside of a lot of these tokens. I'm also going to be sharing with you guys 3 of my favorite low caps built on PulseChain that I think are going to be providing some of the biggest gains and most likely will do easy 10x gains over the next few months. As we're looking at these guys, if you do find any value at any point in this video, please do me a favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribing to this channel. If you guys do want to see how I'm investing, anything I'm buying, selling, trading over the course of these cycles, we post a lot of profitable signals on my Discord, and you guys can sign up by clicking the link in the description to sign up on my website. Now guys, jumping into this market, I wanted to start out with PulseX because this one, in my opinion, is going to outperform PulseChain token, and we can look at both of them. Both charts look the same. This is PulseChain and this is PulseX. However, what we end up seeing is PulseX outperforms on the way up. It makes a more impulsive cycle inside of the uptrend. And then in the same way that it's more impulsive on the way up, it's also, outperforms on the way down. So when we compare the two, PulseChain itself didn't have as big of a sell-off in comparison. And I do think that this is a pattern that's only going to play out from here. Now, when I'm looking at PulseX and when I'm looking at PulseChain, both of these look the same and they are both following the same setup. Now, all of these made their first cycle when they got added to exchange. We made the listing pump, and then we saw our first correction, right? Now, it was inside of this ABC correction, your standard Elliott wave correction. And if you guys don't understand Elliott waves, I'll give you guys an example right now. So this is the chart I always bring up when I'm explaining Elliott wave theory, and I do think that this is probably the best thing that you can look at. When we're comparing the two, notice this correction right here. This A, this B, and the C, this little corrective move. It's the same type of thing that we're inside of right here for PulseX and PulseChain. They're both doing the same setup. Now, what I like to look at when we're comparing these is notice here how you have these little impulses and then they just kind of get bigger. But they're always 3 sets of 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ABC. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ABC. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ABC. And then you have a bigger sort of ABC, but they're all part of the same universal pattern, right? And what we have over here is more or less it explaining that. You have the bigger picture cycle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, ABC. And then inside of each one of these smaller impulses, you have the same thing. And then inside of those, you have the same thing. So Elliott wave theory is literally just human emotion. And this is the reason why I like to map it and chart it, is because we see many of these cryptos follow such emotional cycles, such hyped cycles that are driven through mainly just a lot of mania. So when we see these sort of patterns playing out, all PulseX and PulseChain is just right here at the very beginning of this new cycle. We just made our first little impulse off the lows, and we just finished this ABC correction. And I'll share with you guys exactly what I'm talking about right here. Now, when I first came over to the PulseChain ecosystem 4 or 5 months ago now, I came over when we were at the very bottom of this cycle. In fact, we were right here at my video. We ended up making this final sort of correction right after my video, but I told everybody how this was a wave 1 impulse and we were about to be starting a big picture wave 3. And that's exactly what ended up happening. And I drew this perfectly for everybody to follow. We followed it, and all we're at right now is the first correction of that new cycle, right? So a lot of people have kind of got shaken out. A lot of people are panic selling, capitulating. There was a huge whale that capitulated over here in these 2 little wicks that you see down there. And all we've really seen is the completion of that first correction. What we're looking at on the long-term basis, even just from a support and resistance basis, we came back down and retested the most important level, which was our A wave, right? This was the first support that we ever built when we began our bear market for PulseX. And it's an important level that we're going to have to prove as new support inside of the uptrend, right? So prior to this move, we had only ever been below this level, right? This was support for a short while. And then once we broke below it, it became resistance. We consolidated underneath this level for months and months until finally at the end of 2023, beginning of 2024, we started to break out. Now with this move, all we saw was this first breakout, and with this correction, we're coming all the way back down to retest that same level. This is what is known as a support and resistance flip. Anytime you're looking at the long-term basis, which we could go out to like a weekly time frame, and we can see that this move wasn't really a true retest. We didn't have one true weekly red candle as we first started breaking out. So generally what you're going to see inside of a new cycle is they'll make this first breakout, they'll stay below those all-time highs, maybe get close to them, and then inside of that first sell-off is when they'll come back down and reclaim some of those prior levels from the previous cycle. They'll reclaim them as new support before ultimately going up into new all-time highs. So when I see this cycle, we just finished our first 5-wave impulse off the lows. We just finished our first ABC correction back down. We're doing our first major support and resistance flip of our new cycle. When this thing bottoms, which I do think is pretty much now, we're going to see this thing reverse, and the next move is going to be new all-time highs. And that's why I shared with you guys this cycle, because all we're at right now is the very beginning of a brand new impulse. We just finished the first 5 waves off the low. We just finished our first ABC. We're coming into a big picture wave 3 impulse, which are going to be the biggest ones, the most impulsive, the most parabolic, the biggest ROI is made inside of wave 3. And that's the same type of move that I was calling for when we were all the way back down here at the bottom. I said, this is a wave 1. What's coming next is a wave 3. And that's exactly why this thing was so parabolic in nature. It was much more impulsive, because that's the way that these wave 3s move. Notice how much bigger it is in size compared to the first one. The first one starts the hype. It builds the very first beginning of the momentum. And then it's inside of this wave 3 that most of the adoption comes, because that's when all the hype is generated. So when we're looking at this entire thing just being the same as this little teeny move all the way back down in here, it gives me a lot of confidence, because even though a lot of people are kind of salty at the market, they hate Richard Hart, they're bearish about a million things, the market could not look better in my opinion, and we're about to see a pretty big reversal very soon. Don't be surprised when Richard Hart comes down in here and actually buys the dip and we get a big green candle very soon. And ultimately the same rule is going to be applied over here to PulseChain. Both of these are doing the same setup. Both of them finished ABC corrections. They're currently both retesting their A wave as support. The only real difference is you could say that PulseChain, went a little bit lower, but regardless, they're still holding the same level. They're holding this prior high. They're holding the wave A as support. They reclaimed the level even with the SEC lawsuit. The only real difference is PulseX obviously shows a little bit more buy support. And I think that's just because of the buy burn. But I mean, regardless, we're looking at both of these going into a wave 3. This was a wave 1, this was a wave 3, 4, and 5. So what that means is this entire move is just a big picture wave 1 and a wave 2. We're getting ready for wave 3, wave 4, then we still have a whole nother move to come after that. So big picture, guys, like I really do think that this thing's going to take off in a big way. And I do have it drawn like this, but I'm not even lying when I say that it's probably going to do this. Like I've seen these cycles enough times to know. I could share with you guys a million different charts showing this. In fact, I'm going to share with you guys one right now. Now, this was a cycle I traded in my very first bull run in 2016 and 2017, and I bought this all the way back down at 50 cents, pretty much the bottom. And this was one that took off in a big way, and it's pretty much the same setup that I am expecting from PulseX and PulseChain. When we're looking at these, this thing got added to exchanges, made a listing pump, and then it had this big ABC correction, right? And if you guys notice, when the market first started uptrending, even though this thing didn't have as big of a correction as what we saw with PulseChain, it's still its own sort of thing. Sometimes you're going to see these just instantly break out. Sometimes you're going to see them make a little impulse, correct back down before doing the same thing. At the end of the day, it's all the same universal pattern, and we're beginning a brand new cycle. So when I look at all of these charts, and I see the same ABC correction, the first impulse to begin the new cycle, sitting on support, first higher high of the new trend, I think that this next move is going to be so impulsive and it's going to catch people by surprise. So anybody fading these is just going to miss out. Now, if I had to choose Pulse or PulseX, PulseX any day, it's going to obviously outperform. I just think that if you're going to hold one or the other, you might as well just go all into PulseX. It doesn't make sense to really hold two of them, in my opinion, unless you're actually farming them for some reason and you don't care about the impertinent loss, which Pulse and PulseX, they perform about the same. The impertinent loss won't even hardly be anything, so I wouldn't so much matter farming the two. Now, coming all the way over here and looking at incentive token, this personally is my favorite token out of all of them. I like this way more than all of the rest of the tokens. And what we're doing right here is pretty much the same setup. This kind of looks like a falling wedge type formation. And I'm pretty excited because I do think that this thing is about to break out really bullish. And it's interesting to me that we're creating this kind of falling wedge formation after we just retested pretty much the most important support on the entire chart. If we come all the way back, we can see that when we got added to exchanges, this was the listing price that we opened at. When we sold off and then Richard Hart got sued by the SEC, it was that same level that became resistance right here. Notice how we were above this level, the SEC lawsuit came in, we broke below this level here, we came back up, retested it, except this was acting as resistance, and then that was the level that we sold from. Even in the beginning of the new breakout to start the new cycle, it was this same level that was resistance all the way throughout here before we finally ended up breaking out. So this entire most recent pump, even though we've fully retraced the move, this thing is currently reclaiming the exact same significant level as PulseX and PulseChain, which makes sense. They're obviously going to follow each other. So when I'm seeing this thing making this massive support and resistance flip, and then when we also kind of factor in how much volume there is inside of this market comparatively, we haven't really seen what is in store for Incentive Token. This is truly just the beginning of this cycle. And when we zoom out and we see how far away we are from these prior all-time highs, from where we're at right now, approximately to those all-time highs, it's a little over a 20x type of a move. So when we come out and when we look over here at the D.I.Y chart, this is showing the same exact thing. Notice all of this volume in here. There's more volume down here at the beginning of this new cycle than even what it was at the all-time high. This is always what happens before a huge move ends up setting into the market. So when I'm seeing this thing setting up in these type of ways, I've got nothing but confidence this thing is about to send it in a very, very big picture move. And I think that it's important that we're doing our part by accumulating it, because in my opinion, don't be farming ink. You should be only farming to earn ink and then hold that profit as spot. Don't be trying to farm ink token itself, because if you're trying to deposit ink into a farm with like Pulse or PulseX or Hex or something like that, or a stable coin, what you're going to end up saying is ink is going to outperform everything by so much that you're going to end up losing the thing that's outperforming and end up gaining all of the other stuff, which in my opinion is silly. You might as well just end up farming the token that's going to end up outperforming and holding it as spot so that you can actually realize that gain. You know, if we're looking at you being able to farm 30, 40, 50+% APY and earn Incentive Token, and then Incentive Token is about to do a 20x in value, you know, assuming you're able to earn $100 to $1,000 a day in your yield, that's going to be, you know, $20,000 or like $2,000, $3,000 a day if you're factoring in what this token's going to be worth just holding it for the rest of this year. So these are all things that I think is very important you understand. I see a lot of people thinking that they need to go provide liquidity with their ink token to earn more ink, when they're only going to be losing their money by doing that. Go farm PulseX, go farm, go pair PulseX with Pulse, go pair PulseX with a stable, go do something like that, and then earn ink, and then hold your ink. Don't freaking mess around with trying to farm the token itself, because what you're going to end up doing is losing it as ink outperforms, as you're providing, or as you're farming with ink and then PulseX or some other token. What you're going to end up happening is ink's going to outperform that other token by so much that you're just going to end up losing ink and gaining the other token that's underperforming, which maybe some of you guys want to do that. But for me, I look at charts and I see this thing as being by far the most bullish Richard Heart token. And I think that you guys should do your part by holding it. Now, when we're coming over here and looking at Hex itself is my least favorite one. As far as being like real DeFi and all of those things, like it really is. It is a way that you can, you know, earn interest. But for me, staking money that long and down the line is just silly. I don't think it's smart to do that. I don't believe that. I mean, crypto's been around for 15 years. Why would you decide to stake something for 15 years down the line? You know, we don't even know what the heck's going to change in 15 years because crypto changes so much within 4. So when I'm looking at Hex, now that we can provide liquidity, why would you, you know, stake Hex? You could literally go provide liquidity on PulseChain and then probably earn about the same, minus locking it up forever and then having to emergency end stake if you do, and then eat all of the penalties that are involved with that. To me, I don't like Hex for those reasons. I wouldn't advise really anybody to buy it unless you're holding it as a spot hold, because as a spot hold, yeah, I do think it will do fairly well. Now, when we're looking at these, it does have some exhaustion down here, some bullish divergence forming. We've had lower lows throughout this entire correction, but at the end of the day, we're actually seeing the RSIs bottoming out down in here. And, you know, the OBV itself hasn't really reset up to this point, but we are seeing a lot of exhaustion on the sellers based off of the RSI. So with that happening, with us retesting basically the range lows, I have a lot of confidence that this reverses off of this level. You know, even if we ended up doing something like this, coming back down, I still think that this thing is going to end up reversing and really following all of these other tokens. All of these other tokens are bullish. I mean, I don't think Hex isn't bullish. I just think that there's better things to hold than Hex, in my opinion. Now, I don't know what outperforms between Pulse and Hex. I'm really curious to see that, because I wouldn't be surprised to see Hex outperform PulseChain. But when it comes to PulseX and when it comes to Ink, I find it very, very likely that these two outperform the rest of the ecosystem, with Ink being the very obvious front runner is top ROI out of all the Richard Heart tokens. So for me, I'm not really worried. I'm not really focused on Hex. I don't own any Hex. I'm not really advising anybody else to own it, especially if you're looking at the 3 other tokens. But specifically, you know, Ink is my favorite one. And all I care about is ROI. That's the only thing I care about. I'm not trying to earn yield necessarily unless it's through providing liquidity and, you know, doing things like that, farming. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm mainly trying to buy spot and hold spot, and whatever the chart shows that's going to outperform the most is what I'm going to buy. So when I see something that looks, you know, not as good, why would I tell other people to buy that? So, you know, I would stay away from buying Hex. I would personally buy Ink. That would be the focus because it's the focus of what I buy out of all of these tokens. When it comes to Pulse and it comes to PulseX, just focus on PulseX. I don't really think that there's a reason to really want to buy PulseChain itself. So that's my opinion. Now, guys, let's talk about the 3 favorite altcoins that I think are going to be providing 10x potential gains over the next couple months and rest of this year. And you guys definitely don't want to miss out on holding these because I think that they're going to take off in a really big way. Alrighty, guys, the first token on today's video is going to be Pulse Launch. Wanted to give you guys an update because I have a lot of confidence that this thing is bottomed. We have made this sort of accumulation setup, and as it stands, we made our first higher high, broke out of these range highs, and we just retested them as new support. So when I'm looking at this, I do think that this thing has reversed. We're about to be starting the next leg up in this move. And when we're looking at ROI, this to me is by far my favorite token on PulseChain because the amount of profit you see inside of launch pads is just way higher than anything else inside of the market. Because at the end of the day, there's so many people that are drawn to the idea of getting into pre-sales, and the only way that you can get into the pre-sales is by actually holding and staking the launch token or whatever the incubation project it is. So when I'm looking at launch, having this first higher high, kind of recapturing this prior level as new support, this is about to be starting a much bigger cycle in return. Now this looks like your classic example of an expanded flat correction where you end up having this correction that clears above the range highs, and then you have a sell-off that clears below the range lows as support. And this is the same thing that PulseX did, right? Where you make this breakout, you clear above the range, everybody buys the top, and then you have this big sell-off that also breaks down below support and kind of traps everybody, shakes out all the weak hands before just going back up again. So when I'm looking at Pulse Launch, it did the same pattern where we broke from the range highs being here, and then we also had this temporary breakdown from the range lows, but neither were huge moves. This is a little teeny tiny break above the range highs. This is a little teeny tiny break below the range lows, but it's just enough to shake out all the weak hands before the new cycle restarts. So when I'm looking at Pulse Launch, this thing is 100% reversing right now. This is actually giving everybody a good little opportunity to jump back in on this dip. And this data isn't 100% accurate. The market cap is actually significantly lower. It's about, you know, half as much as what this shows. It's about $2 million. So with over half the supply currently being locked, with the staking contract about to be out, with the staking about to go live, with the marketing push that's about to happen, you know, with the bridge that's about to be added, giving us liquidity to Coinbase as well as Arbitrum, this thing is by far going to be one of the best tokens, and I don't think you guys should miss out on the opportunity of buying the dip. This is probably the last dip we're going to have before we go into new all-time highs. And if we just retest the prior highs, you know, about a 2x. I think that this thing's going to do absolutely massive. 10x is only a little ways away, and for a launch pad, I've got nothing but confidence that this thing does at least a 10x. We're talking over 100x when we're looking at the very best launch pads out there, so, you know, I wouldn't be surprised to see this thing do at the minimum of a 10x. I think this thing's going to go way higher than that, though, big picture. Next up is going to be Icarus. This is another token that I've been watching because I do think that this thing is going to end up breaking out very soon. It has a really nice Elliott wave cycle to begin the new run, and this is basically our first little correction to start this sort of cycle. Now, when we're looking at all of these, I remember I was sharing with you guys the Elliott waves, and all we've really done is just this first cycle right here. Now, the new tokens that just get added to the ecosystem, they obviously have these massive moves, and they look a little bit bigger on paper, or what I should say on the chart, than what they really are actually. Because this thing only has $3.5 million of market cap. But the big thing is, market cap's kind of an obsolete metric. The big thing is liquidity. At only 130K liquidity, there's enough liquidity that you can get in, but at the same time, it doesn't take very much money to really balloon the prices. So when we're looking at the rest of these markets reversing, being PulseChain and PulseX, I've got a lot of confidence that these really low supply tokens are going to end up booming in a big way. There's only 1.82% of the supply that's actually available inside of the pool, and then there's only 1 million total supply. So when we're looking at these things can absolutely balloon in a big way. On the bearish sense, the only thing I could really see from here is us making one final sort of capitulation like that before reversing, or this thing's just going to kind of reverse here with the rest of the market. And my big thing I'm watching for is once we can get back above this B wave, that's where it's full-blown bull season. So you're looking at about 10 bucks. Once Icarus can get above $10, I have a lot of confidence this thing is going to go into a new cycle. And the fun thing about this next cycle is, like I've been talking to you guys about with the Elliott waves, all of the entire tokens in this PulseChain ecosystem have only finished this first little impulse. So when we're looking at these little teeny tiny market cap cryptos, you know, that are going to be able to go up a lot higher in ROI, when the main tokens, the native chain tokens themselves start breaking out, I've got nothing but confidence these things do the same thing. And it's a 420% gain just to the all-time high. You know, could you imagine that we hit that on 420 in 2 days? It really wouldn't surprise me just how quick these things end up moving. So I would watch out for Icarus, because what we've been seeing on the PulseChain ecosystem as a whole has basically been these really low supply tokens that don't have very much pooled inside of the liquidity pool for you to be able to buy, sell, and trade. The prices end up ballooning really quickly, and with all of the hype starting to set in with PulseX as these are reversing, I honestly think that they're going to balloon in a very big way, and Icarus is definitely one you want to be watching out for. Now, the final one on today's video is going to be Wings. Now, this one has even less liquidity, but this is part of the same ecosystem. The cool thing about Wings, as well as Icarus, is they're bonded in liquidity. So whenever Wings goes up, it will end up dragging Icarus up as well, and vice versa. So if Icarus were to reverse, it's going to make, you know, Wings do the exact same thing. All this is done is its first cycle. We made this first little beginning pump, but it only has 40K liquidity. So with it only having a 2 million total supply and only less than 0.05% of the total supply is currently available in the LP, which means this thing has a much bigger room for upside because the supply crunch is going to be a lot bigger. There's going to be a much bigger supply shock between Wings versus Icarus, even though that's what's going to be happening in both. That's why there's a lot of these that are starting to take off. SolidX was one that blew up. You know, Axis Alive was the original OG altcoin over here that basically has a really scarce supply. And what we end up seeing is they perform super well, because as the liquidity grows inside of the ecosystem, because there's such a small amount of the total supply existing in the LP, when the LP grows, because PulseChain itself starts going up and the liquidity is growing, it ends up dragging these up in return. So they always end up just going up because there's more liquidity entering the market and there's a low supply. So with this thing only having 0.05% of an already scarce 2 million supply and 100% of the circulating supply is on the market, I honestly think that this thing's going to take off in a big way. We're just kind of finishing out these little corrections down in here, but this was the first cycle. And what we're currently finishing is this little ABC correction. A, B, and we might get one more low. I wouldn't be surprised if we came down to like $13 to $14. But regardless, you know, it's really riding around the rest of the markets. If Bitcoin reverses here and Ethereum reverses and PulseChain and all the other ones like I've talked about, then this thing is going to do the same thing. And for me, when we're looking at 30-minute time frames, it's not really I'm not worried about the short-term price, because regardless, I'm anticipating something like this if we get a lower low. And then if we don't get a lower low, I'm mostly just anticipating we're going to end up finding support down in here, something like this. So I think that this thing is going to boom in a big way. You're looking at a 4x gain between Icarus going to its all-time high and where Wings is. You're looking at about a 3x gain, but this thing only has 40K liquidity. I mean, one $10,000 buy could make a candle go all the way to 50 bucks. So you're talking about a huge supply crunch that's going to take place once these things end up reversing. So I wouldn't be fading them. I think they're all going to be breaking out. Gave you guys some update on Pulse launch. This thing's reversing after this sort of accumulation that we've been through. Gave you guys an update with Icarus. Wanted to talk a little bit about Icarus and why I think that this thing is going to be breaking out in a big way. And then Icarus and Wings are paired together, and Wings itself has a much smaller liquidity and a much smaller supply, so I do think that the ROI is going to be a little bit bigger with Wings. If Wings goes up, it's going to end up bringing Icarus up and vice versa, so make sure you guys check them out. I'm going to link everything in the description for anybody that's interested in actually checking these out. Make sure that you guys are following along with this analysis. Make sure you're not panic selling any of these lows as we're down in here. Remarkable buying opportunities across the board. I have a lot of confidence that anybody that buys down here in this dip is going to end up being happy that they did so, because the next move coming is about to be pretty insane. You know, looking at this wave 3 starting into the market, when that wave 3 sets in, you got to know the ink is going to blow up. You got to know that Hex is probably going to go into a new all-time high, and then, you know, these lower market cap cryptos are going to absolutely send it, especially these lower supply tokens. Now with Pulse Launch having over half the supply locked, you're going to end up seeing the exact same type of significance with a lot less supply on the market. What happens when you have a lot of demand and not very much supply on the market? Well, we end up seeing the entire market blow up as a whole. So once again, guys, if you find value in this, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these updates. For anybody that does want to end up seeing how I'm investing, buying, selling, trading, any signals that I post, how I'm personally investing my own portfolio, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. I look forward to seeing you guys in there. A lot of value going to be provided, and I think the markets are just barely getting started before some major upside potential very soon. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.